Let's have a show of hands. Put your hands up if you've ever laughed at a Honda Goldwing. I have. And Pan-Europeans and everything enormous that when you see it on the road, you go, that's not a motorcycle, that's a car with two wheels. So I figured after all the years of mocking these things, I should actually try it and see what it's all about, because there's something about a Goldwing that has a little bit of legendary status. The model's been around since the 70s. This particular one is the 5th generation of Goldwing, and if you imagine big cross-continental touring journeys, this is the kind of bike you picture it on. Big, comfy, huge screen, a radio, seat heating. It is a bike that has a kind of iconic cult that ignores all the adventure touring, all the Charlie Borman wannabe ride off-road with the big boxes. This was way, way before any of that. This was a cult motorcycle for doing massive distances. The details and the statistics on a bike like this are kind of mind-boggling, especially if you're a motorcycle person. Everything about it, the handlebars don't look like motorbike handlebars. The seat doesn't look like a motorbike seat. The foot controls don't look like normal motorbike foot controls. The rear luggage boot thing opens with a flipper on the button. There's a lever to open the panniers. Every little detail about it doesn't feel like a regular bike. It's a bit different. And that runs through into the engine. It's just shy of 120 brake horsepower, I think 118 horsepower. Wet with fuel, it's 407 kilos. That is a monstrous bit of kit. It's a huge bike. But you can kind of see where the weight's gone because it's got these giant armchairs on the back of it. It's got speakers at the back and at the front. It has cruise control, it has adjustable screen, it has ventilation for your legs. It's got cubby holes everywhere you look. It's got reverse gear, for goodness sake. It's a ridiculously high-tech bit of kit designed to make big mileage as comfortable as possible on a motorcycle. Which, if you're someone like me who's spent a lot of time freezing to death on a sports bike in the pouring rain, it's quite an interesting prospect. Now, the comment you hear with a bike like this all the time is, why not just buy a car? It's what everyone says. I'm sure I've said it before in the past. If you're gonna have all this comfort and weight, why spoil the ride? Why not just get a car and have a small bike? But I've got a feeling that this would still be better than a car. I feel like it's still a motorcycle. You still have to lean it to go around corners. You still have to ride it. You're out in the open air. I've got faith, I've got hope that there's still more to it than just being in a box. So I'm going to take it to some really fun roads today, some nice scenic riding, and see if it can still put a smile on my face in a way that something with four wheels never can. Or I'm completely wrong and I'm going to come back and tell you never buy a Goldwing. Let's find out. Wow. Look at this thing. I'm going to confess I have spent a larger proportion of my life just quietly poking fun at Goldwings. I didn't get them, and I tell people all the time not to judge motorcycles without riding them. Yeah, I was quite happy to poke fun at the monster that was the Goldwing. Oh, I don't want one of them. They're a car. They're not a real motorbike. What's the point? But when the opportunity came to ride this one today, I was actually really excited because it is such a hugely different thing to the sort of motorcycle I would normally pick. It's a monstrous 400 kilo touring machine with a flipping armchair strapped to the top of it. But a beautiful engine. That whopping great 6-cylinder 1800cc just torque monster. I've always looked at it as a motorcycle, that's a motorbike, and for me a motorbike means charging around corners and riding off-road and doing track days and all that sort of stuff. But a motorbike for me has never meant sitting in the saddle from the minute I finish breakfast till lunch, and then from the minute I finish lunch until tea time, and covering 400 miles, 500 miles, 800 miles in a day. But if that's your sort of motorcycling, what a tool to do it on. For me, the thought of riding all the way across the other side of Europe in one go isn't super exciting, but actually if I had one of these, maybe it would be. Riding to the Alps in a day on this would actually be a nice experience. So this 5th gen Goldwing is 20 or so years old now. It's not done a lot of miles. This one, 17,000 miles, is not big mileage for a Goldwing. A few things to keep an eye out on these bikes. Generally very under stressed, so it's not like they're going to blow engines up and stuff like that. They've got really wide service intervals for the valve clearances and the bigger services, but actually fairly tight regular oil changes, regular minor services. I think they're like 4,000 mile intervals for that, so you want to see some service history, same as any used motorcycle. Bit of corrosion is what you want to watch out for, you know, especially one that's been used outside in all weathers or has been parked up outside. Keep an eye out for corrosion on them. You don't want to see a load of things rotting, particularly things like exhausts. So they have a combined front and rear braking system, and it's one of those where the rear brake pedal activates one piston on the front caliper and the front does one on the rear. You know, it's one of them. So you need to make sure that's in good condition and not seized up, because they're not impossible to fix, but it's one of those things that's prone to getting a bit sticky over time. On top of that, they actually have a anti-dive system, a hydraulic anti-dive system in the forks. Again, something that can suffer from the corrosion. But other than the normal look around it, make sure it's not rotten and rusty, have a look at the way it's been worked on. If you can see lots of broken clips and popped missing fasteners and things like that, these are a bit of a monster to work on, as I'm sure you can imagine. There's a million bits of dash and trim and fairing and panel everywhere. If it's been worked on by someone who's not that careful or doesn't really know what they're doing, even though it's gone back together, you can find some problems later on, wiring problems, things not being plugged in right, wiring harnesses rubbing. You know, you just need to make sure that whoever's done the work on it over the years has had half an idea what they're doing, and it's not been lashed together with the panels hanging off, because then you're going to end up in trouble later on down the line. And bear that in mind when you're buying one. You know, if you're buying a bit of a fixer-upper, they're not the easiest thing in the world to fix up. They're not the easiest thing to work on. It's not rocket science. It's just plan for everything to take a little bit longer. Every panel, everything you need to undo just takes a little bit extra time. And if you're paying someone to do that work, that time is going to cost you more money. So bear those things in mind. It's not as bad to move around as I had envisioned as well. You see the size of things like this, you think, gee, how am I ever going to lift that off the side stand? But I've had to manoeuvre out of M&P's showroom past about 20 other bikes, and it wasn't that bad. You know, on the flat you can roll it. It's pretty low center of gravity. It's reasonably well balanced. Right down near walking pace, if you're just trying to shuffle up in the traffic, it takes a little bit more concentrating than it would on a regular small size bike. But really, as soon as the thing's rolling, you can balance it and steer it pretty nicely. I'm surprised by that. A couple of things, like trying to get your leg to the ground, you have to shuffle your bum forward on the seat, because otherwise you're sort of cupped in the armchair and you can't get your leg out. But not as intimidating as I thought it was going to be. I've yet to drop it. I'm interested to see how hard it is to pick up. Maybe I'll do that later. Well, not drop it, obviously, but... I know what you're thinking. You're thinking a 400 kilo bike, what happens if I drop it? I'm kind of thinking that too, but there's only one way to find out. I have got grass here, I have been nice. They have got like little outrigger things, so I'm presuming that stops them going too far down. This feels wrong. This feels very wrong. It's dropped. It doesn't actually go too far down, does it? Right, let's see. I reckon I could do that one-handed. Ish. So actually, it is really heavy, but not too bad to pick up. Real world testing. You get it here. Here's the question then. Can I U-turn Goldwing in the road this wide? Oh, I'm not certain I can. Oh, needn't have worried. Needn't have worried. Look at that. Time for a little cheeky data tag plug. Now, you don't have to buy this bike secondhand, but if you buy a secondhand bike, any secondhand bike, check to see if it's got data tag on it already. If it has, get on their website and re-register it so it's got your details. That way, if it gets nicked, if any of the bits try and be sold elsewhere, it'll be you that gets the phone call rather than the previous owner, who by then has got a shiny new bike and probably doesn't care anymore. It costs 20 quid and it's worth it if it helps cut down motorcycle theft. that is not motorcycling in any way I've ever experienced it before, but it definitely is motorcycling. You still get wet, you still can get bugs in your teeth, especially if you open the little venty thing in the screen, and you're out in the air, you're out in the wind, you're riding corners, you're having to concentrate on the road, you're having to plan and experience and think in a way that you never do when you're driving a car. So for me, my old hang-ups about why not just buy a car, I take it all back. The Goldwing is not a car, which shouldn't be the thing that breaks the internet today, we all knew that, but what I'm trying to say is it still feels like you're riding a motorbike, a big motorbike, a really long motorbike and a heavy motorbike, but something about it, something about that connection of throttle and cornering and handlebars and all the little weird nuances that make motorcycling flipping awesome, that still does it. That still does that same feeling for me. I'm absolutely not going to buy one of them to get up on Sunday morning and go and scratch up my favourite mountain roads. No sir. But it has got me thinking, maybe I don't take it back to M&P this afternoon. Maybe I could just ride to Cornwall on it, and then France, and then Germany, and then maybe Portugal, and oh, actually, wouldn't it be nice to ride one across America? It wants you to use it in a different way, and if that's not for you, don't buy one. But if you fancy a bit of big, long distance touring, a bit of open, chilled out, cruisy motorcycling on your own or with a pillion, it's a different type of motorcycling, but it's a flipping good one, and that thing is incredible at it. We always like to have a little insurance quote when we're looking at second-hand bikes, because it's nice to know you're not going to buy something that costs you 8 million quid to insure. Interestingly, Goldwing's kind of on the cheaper end of the spectrum. We put our pretend human being, Bert, the teacher from Norwich, who we invented for this purpose. He's a pretty steady rider, is Bert, and you know what? Recently he's come into a bit of cash and decided he fancies a bit of touring. So he's bought himself a Goldwing. Our mates at B-Moto reckon 170 quid to insure that fully comp for the year. Good on you, Bert. Now there are a few things about it that took some figuring out. It's got one of those brilliant old school Honda gearboxes that is code for use the clutch and a big thump on your foot. It's an agricultural feeling gearbox. It's not super slick, but once you figure it out and work out where it wants to be changed, it works nicely. The engine is gorgeous. That roaring 6-cylinder, you just find it addictive just to constantly in any gear you're in, and it just whisks you off to decent speed and then holds you there. It does make a very good noise. At the other end of the spectrum, you can drop it right down to 2.5 RPM, purring along, clutch out, not having to ride the clutch to stop it stalling, and it just chugs along in the traffic. When you get right down to the manoeuvring it around a gravelly car park, it requires some forethought. If you get a bit blasé and tip it into a corner and have a little bobble, it's a heavy old thing. You've got to be thinking about what you're doing on it. So if you're nervous about dropping bikes, that's a big old lummox to be dealing with. That said, it doesn't pretend to be anything else. And all day I've found myself repeatedly fascinated by, what does that button do? What does that lever do? There's a lever on the dash that opens two little flappy things by your feet. I'm assuming that's to keep your feet warm when it's cold, because they're right next to the exhausts. But I've taken all day to figure out what that does. It's awesome. And I've still not got bored of walking up and flipping the little button so that the top box opens so I can stick my helmet and stuff in there. Little things like that, they just make you smile. It's a special motorcycle. Whether you like it or not, whether you want a super bike or a supermoto or a dirt bike or an adventure bike or a touring bike, there's no getting away from that. That is a special thing, and it's awesome that it exists. I'm not ready to buy one yet, but I'm intrigued. Goldwing gets my tick of approval. I like that. Now this particular example is for sale at M&P's showroom in Swansea. Interestingly, they said pretty much everyone who goes into the shop goes and has a look at that and wants to sit on it. It's one of those intriguing bikes that everyone's sort of got a bit of a guilty pleasure for, I think, but is probably too embarrassed to admit it. No one's bought it yet, but honestly, for a big touring bike, that thing is £8,800. Now, a brand new Goldwing is 30 grand, and the latest one has loads of fancy features, but for doing the job of big miles, big travel, big comfort, just get that one. If you go to a charity shop, you can buy these things called CDs, which are sort of round, shiny discs that used to have music on them. Well, mostly music and scratches, but get to the charity shop, buy some CDs, hit the highway, and for 8,700 quid, that is a hell of a lot of motorcycle, even just in kilograms alone.